Good evening. It's Sunday, the 19th of October. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. Nadav Shoham, who was one of 3 Israelis killed in the Nepal avalanche tragedy, was today laid to rest in his hometown of Hoshaya in the Lower Galilee. His body was returned to the country ahead of a group of injured surviving Israelis who were evacuated from one of the worst trekking disasters to ever hit the Himalayas. We get more from IBA's Aryeh O'Sullivan.
Despite the avalanche, despite the deaths, the draw of the Annapurna Trail continues to entice trekkers who set out on the very path that saw nearly 40 hikers and guides killed in last week's avalanche. In the midst of intense rescue efforts, the Nepalese authorities decided, finally, to close the trail. As the days pass, survivors have begun to tell tales of irresponsible local guides and inept medical treatment that made the natural disaster into a human tragedy. This British hiker said bad judgment by the Nepalese turned the hike into a death trap.
I couldn't see through my glasses, and the sky had changed colour. The ground sort of seemed to be the same as the sky, and the conditions at that time were, I believe, life-threatening, and decisions should have been made at that time to save people's lives. People have been led to their death unnecessarily, and the systems and processes that are in place have contributed towards those people dying, and I feel really, really sad that those people have died and that the people are still missing. And not only that, there are people that are injured, and this could have been prevented.
Yesterday, 6 more missing Israelis were located and rescued. The exact whereabouts of 5 other Israelis is still unknown, but their lives are not believed to be in danger. The search is still on, however, for Israeli trekker Michal Gili-Charkesky, a 33-year-old woman from Givatayim. Ironically, she had set out to the Annapurna Trail to retrace the steps of her boyfriend, who was killed in an avalanche there 13 years ago. Nepalese officials said they hoped improved weather conditions would speed up recovery efforts for some 40 people still missing.
If there is a report of the injured person, then we immediately go there. But if there is a report of the dead body, then we'll confirm first and then only go there. It is improved from yesterday, but if the snowing is stopped, then the very heavy wind is there. So that is the, technicality of this is wind and snow. So whenever if there is a heavy wind, then the operating chopper is very difficult.
Meanwhile, Israeli trekkers were grateful to be back after their ordeal, which didn't just end with their rescue, but continued into the inadequate medical treatment they received in Nepal. 7 of the injured Israelis were flown back to Israel for treatment, some at Hadassah and Kerem, and some at Tel HaShomer. Most were suffering from moderate to severe frostbite. Head of trauma at Hadassah Hospital, Professor Avi Rifkin, traveled to Nepal to help the wounded and says it appears a whole day or 2 was wasted in the Nepal military hospital, and their conditions improved only after they were transferred to an American hospital. He warned Israelis against visiting the Annapurna range since there were no facilities to deal with emergencies. 29 people were killed in the avalanche and blizzard, including Shoham and 2 other Israelis. The coffins of Tamar Ariel and Agam Luria are to be flown back in the coming days. Aryeh O'Sullivan for IBA News.
In other news, a rather feisty foreign minister Avigdor Lieberman has gone on the warpath, lashing out at several targets, including Minister of Economy Naftali Bennett, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and the Bnei Sachin soccer team. IBA's Eli Wogelenter reports.
Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman lashed out at Economy Minister Naftali Bennett last night, accusing him of misinterpreting remarks by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in order to score political points. Said Lieberman, there may be differences of opinion among friends, but there is no need to attack. All the ranting here is nothing but harmful. Maybe it will bring some voters, but it will also do a lot of political damage. Kerry had said on Thursday at an event marking the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha that it was imperative to restart stalled Israeli-Palestinian talks since the conflict was helping the Islamic State recruit new members. Bennett fired back at Kerry in response, implying Kerry was using an anti-Semitic canard. Even when a British Muslim beheads a British Christian, there will always be those who blame the Jews, Bennett wrote on his Facebook page. And Communications Minister Gilad Erdan accused the top U.S. diplomat of showing an unprecedented lack of understanding of the Middle East. Erdan asked sarcastically on his Facebook page whether anyone believes Islamic State fighters would put down their arms if Israeli-Palestinian talks were restarted. Lieberman also issued a statement last night lambasting Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas for calling on Friday for Muslims to prevent Jews by all means from going to and desecrating the Temple Mount. Abbas reiterated those statements yesterday, saying his people should guard a Jerusalem holy site against visiting Jews, whom he referred to as a herd of cattle. Lieberman said Abbas's words reveal again the true face of Mahmoud Abbas, the Holocaust denier who talks about a Palestinian state free of Jews. Abbas, Lieberman said, was and remains an anti-Semite wrapped in a nice suit and pleasantries for the international community. And finally, Lieberman also slammed the Bnei Sakhnin Israeli Arab soccer team for holding a ceremony last night honoring former Balad MK Azmi Bashara, who was suspected of spying for Hezbollah. Lieberman called for the suspension of the soccer team from the Israeli Premier League and urged that strong measures be taken against it. Before the game between Bnei Sakhnin and Hapoel Tel Aviv in the Doha Stadium in Sakhnin, the team held a ceremony in honor of their Qatari sponsors and others, including Bashara, a former Knesset member who fled Israel in 2007 after he was questioned on suspicion of aiding Hezbollah. Lieberman wrote on his Facebook page, "I call on the Israel Football Association and the Premier League's management to suspend Bnei Sakhnin from the league and take immediate harsh measures against it, such as heavy fines, and force it to play home games behind closed doors for a long period. To the group's owners, I would suggest considering moving to play in the Palestinian League or the Qatari League." Eli Wogelanter, IBA News.
In the wake of the Kerry Bennett spat, Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon headed for the United States today for an intense 5-day working visit. Ahead of his departure, Ya'alon issued a statement saying that relations between the U.S. and Israel are based on common interests and shared values, and they cannot be overshadowed by any disagreement of any sort. While in Washington, the defense minister is slated to hold talks with his U.S. counterpart, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, as well as a number of other senior defense officials. In New York, Ya'alon will meet with United Nations Secretary Ban Ki-moon, who just left the region. Ya'alon's agenda will focus on threats posed by a nuclear Iran, the stalled Israeli-Palestinian peace process, this summer's conflict with Gaza, and the advance of the Islamic State in the Middle East. Even a change of policy will not improve Israel's image in the world. Well, that's the view of World Jewish Congress President Ronald Lauder, who told Israel Television's Yaakov Achimeir that Israel is badly harming itself by speaking with multiple voices.
If Israel changed its policy, and I'm not saying it should, there will still be the same negative things because they are trying to look at Israel and make it into something that is wrong, that's happening. It has nothing to do with the policy. They say, look, if you stop settlements and you stop doing things in East Jerusalem, what would happen? They'll find something else. It's not really that question. The real question is, and I'm not talking about Israeli policy, the real question is, Israel must give out a message about being the democracy.
What we or the Israeli leadership should do in order to correct this situation?
I believe that it's important to start to spend more money, more effort in the media, particularly on the internet. I used the example one time that if Israel had one less plane and used that money for Hasbara, it would make a world of difference. Right now, it's interesting, several moderate states in the Middle East, who were potentially Israel's enemies in the past, have come out and said, look, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The fact is that you have Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and Jordan looking at Israel and saying this is a country that at least can...
Are they potential allies of Israel, in your opinion?
They are potential allies of Israel. I would say many moderates in the Middle, all the moderates in the Middle East are allies. And I think that if there was any type of a peace treaty between Israel and Palestinians, you would have other countries joining in.
Do you believe, Mr. Lauder, that Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing a good job in the UN or in the US Congress, in the media? How do you feel about it?
I will say that I was in the UN when Prime Minister Netanyahu gave his speech. It was a brilliant speech. It was a speech talking about peace. It was talked about Iran and what came out. It talked about all the different issues there. He is probably the best communicator that Israel has on this issue. But what's happened is that the whole area, he himself is competing against a whole network of Palestinian and different groups, Arab groups, fighting against Israel, and they're spending tens of millions, if not billions of dollars on this, and Israel is spending very little. There's only so much one man can do against that. Now, also, Israel has its own internal politics, which I think is pretty unique now in the world. And these politics are hurting Israel from within.
The domestic politics.
Domestic politics hurting within.
Why it's hurting Israel?
Because they see different fights within the government.
Well, this is a democracy.
I understand that, but you're asking the question, and the question is, there has to be one voice coming out of what Israel stands for. Right now, you have many different voices coming out, and very much by your question, I understand where you're coming from. And the fact is, each person comes from a different point of view. It's great internally, but externally, there has to be one voice. And that's the problem that I see also, because people are saying, well, let's wait for a different change of government, we'll get a better deal, or let's do this and that. It doesn't work. It works when you have one person that is behind, and the whole country is behind that person. Interestingly enough, during the beginning of the war with Gaza, I use the word war, the country was completely behind the Prime Minister. And I think that was a very special time, and we understood, everyone understood that. The fact is that whenever there is a prime, who's ever in charge, that is the person who has to feel that the country is behind him.
Officials in Nigeria are claiming to have made a deal with Boko Haram terrorists for a ceasefire that includes the return of 200 schoolgirls abducted by the group in April. At the same time, terror attacks continue in the volatile northeast of the African nation, with numerous deaths reported in two separate attacks. Officials say that they remain confident that they have arranged the release of the girls, who are among the 276 students seized from a government secondary school, sparking worldwide shock and outrage. The ceasefire was announced on Friday by the head of the Nigerian army, and according to senior governmental officials, the girls will be released by Tuesday. The mood in Lagos, however, is less than optimistic.
Are you so sure that these people, yes, they are really going to cease the fire? Are you so sure they are not deceiving you? Are you so sure? Okay, where or what and what are the details or the agreement you've reached? Why don't you say it out? Okay, what exactly are they asking for?
It would be suicidal for the military to make the mistake of saying it is Uhuru. It's over. That will be strategic miscalculation. In actual fact, what we expect now is that the military should move further, should move in further, situate themselves in strategic location, and make sure that every area that the sect said they have occupied, they recover them.
Clashes described as the fiercest in days are ongoing in Kobani as Islamic State forces intensified attacks against the Kurdish defenders of the Syrian town with mortars and car bombs and overnight fighting. Meanwhile, unverified video posted on the internet is said to have been taken of the Kurdish troops celebrating their recapturing of countryside near the strategic town on the border with Turkey. Other images include a weapons cache purportedly seized from the radical Islamist in gun battles, including Kalashnikov rifles, machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, mortars, ammunition, and night vision binoculars. The latest gains come as the tempo of U.S.-led airstrikes has been increased dramatically on ISIS targets near Kobani after the insurgents pounded the area with heavy shelling. Other strikes were launched at ISIS strongholds in Iraq, where the Islamic State has conquered wide areas of territory in its quest to establish an Islamic caliphate. Kurds living abroad have been actively expressing their fury, especially at Turkey, that more is not being done by the international community to help their besieged compatriots in Syria. Hundreds of members of the Kurdish community in France gathered in the center of Paris yesterday, demanding a stronger response to the Islamic State, including the opening of a humanitarian corridor between Turkey and Kobani for the delivery of aid for the wounded and transfer of volunteers wishing to join the Kurds fighting ISIS. Many of the demonstrators also waved banners denouncing the proposal from Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to create a buffer zone between the two nations for the housing of those who are fleeing the violence. Turning to the United States, where a memorial mass was held in Rochester, New Hampshire, to mark what would have been the birthday of slain American journalist James Foley, who was the first Western hostage to be beheaded by the Islamic State. A grisly video of the brutal murder was released August 19th, in which Foley's executioner claimed that he was being killed in retaliation for U.S. airstrikes on ISIS insurgents in Iraq. Over 1,000 mourners packed Our Lady of the Holy Rosary Parish, including many who did not know the victim personally but came to demonstrate their sympathy and to remember the life of James Foley.
Its presence here on this 41st birthday for me is very real. For his work in telling the personal stories of people trapped by war and senseless violence continues even to this day.
I'll never make complete sense of why Jim died, but I don't think that is for me to understand. But he did not die in vain. He reminded us simply that good does triumph over evil. Anyone who had forgotten this need only follow his story. It has been said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. Jim was a man of action, as his legacy shows. In his final mortal action, his final lesson came in the form of his act of martyrdom. Jim died because of what he believed in. Others may disagree, but as Father mentioned, I know in my heart he put himself first. He demonstrated the ultimate act of selflessness. Jim died for his faith. Jim died because he was American and represented the core values we stand for. He died so others may live.
A memorial was also held in Scotland for the third Western ISIS victim, David Haines. The Islamic State released a video of the beheading of the 44-year-old father of two on September 13th. Haines was abducted March of last year in Syria, where he was working to help refugees from the civil war. Among those who gathered at the Perth Congregational Church to remember Haines was the widow of British taxi driver turned humanitarian aid worker Alan Henning, who was the fourth hostage murdered by ISIS. Sitting alongside of Barbara Henning, Haines' brother Mike said that the families share common grief.
David, like Alan, was a humanitarian worker. They went into Syria to help the people of Syria, no matter their religion, no matter their race, no matter their creed or politics. We have been overwhelmed by the messages from the British public and around the world, and it's been a support to the both of us and our families. People from all faiths stand with us calling for unity. It has been good to come from these senseless murders. I hope it is our communities can become closer.
In efforts to bolster Egypt's economy damaged by years of political turmoil, government leaders in Cairo have announced the launching of a flagship project to dredge a new Suez Canal alongside the 145-year-old existing waterway, which is the fastest shipping route between Europe and Asia. Prime Minister Ibrahim Meleb and the head of the Suez Canal Authority announced the signing of contracts with 6 international firms from the United States, Belgium, the Netherlands, and the United Arab Emirates. Egyptian military engineers began initial work on the project after its unveiling in August. An excavation will require up to 36 dredgers to remove an estimated 250 million cubic meters of material from 6 new canal zones, designed to more than double revenues from $5 billion to $13.5 billion by 2023. An official at the American company awarded the tender said that the technical aspects of the project are straightforward, but that the challenges are the scale and the time frame.
In Zone 6, there's a lot of interaction with the canal. The key thing for this whole execution of Zone 6 is that we can't delay the convoys for the canal. So there'll be a lot of interaction, with the Canal Authority to make that happen and not have interruptions to disrupt their revenue stream.
Here at home, workers at Government Employment Services today closed their doors to the public in protest of a decision by management to downsize the number of offices across the country. Officials from the Histadrut Labor Federation are calling for government intervention in the negotiations with the workers, maintaining that the move would not only seriously harm employment service personnel, but also those seeking jobs. Some 63,000 travelers will pass through Ben Gurion International Airport today as the Jewish holiday season comes to an end. A whopping 1.4 million people either arrived at or departed from the terminals during the 4-week time frame that began with the Rosh Hashanah New Year on September 24th. The top destinations for Israelis were Greece, Italy, and the United States. The Central Bureau of Statistics is reporting that the nation's citizens are traveling more frequently, with some 4 million people catching flights abroad during the first 9 months of 2014, representing a 6% jump over the same period last year. Turning to sports and basketball, where all eyes will be on the new Pius Arena tonight when Hapoel Jerusalem hosts Hapoel Tel Aviv. Jerusalem can become the first team in the Winners' League to go 3-0 after emerging victorious during the team's first 2 league contests in blowouts. On the other hand, the Capital Hoopsters are coming off of a disappointing defeat to Banvit Banirma of Turkey in its Euro Cup opener. Hapoel Tel Aviv is coming off its first win of the season, having defeated Ironi Naharia. The game will be broadcast live on Israel Television Channel 1 beginning at 8:45 later tonight. Taking a look at local finance, and with no currency trading on Sunday, the shekel remains the same, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange put in a mixed performance on this first day of the trading week. Here's a look at the late afternoon numbers. The IBA weather team says that we can expect our unseasonably cool temperatures to stay with us until at least midweek, while we will see more isolated rain tomorrow morning, mainly in the south and east of the country, but those showers should taper off by afternoon. Here's the forecast at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this evening. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow at 5 o'clock when Laura Cornfield will be here to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.